Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Joel Hunter, host of Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth. And on today's program, I've been waiting for today. These are all my very good friends. And it's going to be hard to stay on any particular subject just because we enjoy each other so much. But this is Rabbi Stephen Engel, who is the rabbi of the largest Reformed congregation in town, but he's kind of a national guy, and just a very enjoyable friend. All of us have known each other for 20 years or more. Next to him is Brian Fullwider, who is the chairman of the Interfaith Council of Central Florida, also chairman of Building Us, but was a senior pastor of the United Church of Christ in Winter Park before that time. And on the end, again, my very good friend, Imam Muhammad Musri, who is the president of the Islamic Society of Central Florida. He is not only a local imam, but again, a national leader. And so these guys have a program on WMFE, what's the PBS or
public radio station?
Public radio station, called the Three Wise Guys, and they approach issues from an interfaith perspective. But I wanted to do two things today. First of all, I want to ask them about their relationship together, because obviously here are three people with very different theologies who have grown a friendship together, and they enjoy each other, and so I just want to let me just start there. So, do you guys ever argue?
All the time.
All the time, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But with friendship behind our arguments, so a different kind of argument.
Yeah. And often the two will argue, I will have to referee.
That's true.
That's how it is.
He's the peacemaker, the imam's the peacemaker.
That's right.
Do you talk about differences in theology, or do you just kind of stay away from uncomfortable, differences, or how do you approach that?
We jump in to differences in theology all the time, and we have a very different perspective often on that. However, we can always find common ground as well, but we have disagreements about theological ideas and understandings,
and that's okay.
Yeah, in a world sometimes where people think that if there's someone that you disagree with or someone that you have a difference of opinion with, you have to yell at them and scream at them and be uncivil and call them names and put them down. We try to model that we can have just as strong disagreements, but we discuss with each other based on our relationship in a deeper way and more meaningful way without all that nonsense.
Yeah, that's
Cut
awesome.
through all the nonsense.
That's awesome.
There's too much of that today.
Because the zeitgeist is, the spirit of the times is, you've got to be against somebody. Right. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong, somebody's, and all of us have an approach to truth that we believe is true. But very few of us have the humility to say, you might know something I don't know. Maybe I could learn from you. Yeah. So, Imam Musri, let me ask you, when you guys talk both on the radio program and in public, I know that you have two things in the back of your mind that you'd like to do. You'd like to educate folks as to what your faith backgrounds really mean, citing your scriptures and being able to say, this is why we believe what we believe. But you also like to serve the community in different ways. Could you give us some ways that the Islamic Society of Central Florida serves the entire community, just as a matter of compassion, as a matter of following your faith?
Well, like other communities in the many churches across Central Florida, the Jewish community, we feel the responsibility to love our neighbors as in the commandment, as ourselves. So we are surrounded by a lot of people who are in need. So we have a food pantry, we have thrift store, we have a health clinic, free health clinic, and over 90% of the people served are not Muslim, but that doesn't matter. We don't check faith at the door. We say, this is our responsibility, our duty to be good to our neighbors, to love our neighbors in any way possible. We have a homeless program where we reach out to homeless folks who are around us, in many living in the woods, and we feel that they're not going to come and knock on our door. We have to go and find them and help them out. Many of them are really good people who have fallen on very hard times, and we feel that God is looking at us and say, where are you? Are you visiting me when I'm hungry and homeless? And we find joy in doing that, because while a lot of people like to think of Muslims through the lens of the national headlines and international headlines, we like to focus on the real work in the trenches, helping people, because after all, we are all one people. We are all children of God, and we see in them, we see ourselves, and we say, if I was there, wouldn't I want someone to come out and lend me a hand and lift me up? So that's our basic philosophy, is good religion is not preaching your theology to somebody else, but good religion is God wants to see you doing the work of God that He loves.
Yeah. This is, by the way, those of us at this table are all of the Abrahamic tradition. We all claim Abraham as the father of our faiths, our three different streams. And so we have a kind of a unity, or a kind of a togetherness that comes from our history. Rabbi, you said something last night, we were talking last night, that really struck me, and that is that the Jewish people have been the outsiders for many times in history. And there's a recurring phrase in the Hebrew scripture about remembering you were once the sojourner, you were once the alien. Can you say just a little bit about that?
Well, in our Torah, which is what, as we said last night, which is what you call the OT, the Old Testament, we call the only Testament, but we share that scripture, or the five.
He's trying
books.
to get a debate started. I'm not falling
okay,
for
well,
it.
it's my usual technique of the show. We like to engage in discussion, not for argument's sake, but for learning.
I just tell them how
sure.
I just tell them how sad you only have one Testament.
But in that text that we share, there are words that are repeated over and over again. And the idea that nothing in the text is superfluous, everything is there for a meaning and for a purpose. And so if something is there 36 times, more than any piece of scripture, then it means something. We're being told something by that. And those words are, you shall not oppress the widow, the orphan, or the stranger. 36 times in the Torah. That's not there by coincidence. It's telling us something about those people, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, are models of the most vulnerable people in society. And as you said, since you're going to quote me, because I'm going to quote you back, that you said that people of power have choice. They can use their power to oppress people, they can use their power to stand on the sidelines, or they can use their power to make a difference. And what that piece of text is telling us is, don't stand on the sidelines. Especially since you know the way that it feels. You have a specific responsibility. If people have oppressed you and made you the outsider, and made you the stranger, how dare you then turn around and do that same thing to another group of people? That's just morally reprehensible to do that.
That is right. Reverend, you have, first of all, let me catch up on what Rabbi was saying, that it's important to identify with those who are in need. Empathy is the main motivator for not just giving them what they need, but for being with them in a way that makes them feel respected and gives them dignity. And so you're probably the guy among us that is the most known for interfaith work. And you chair the Interfaith Council. And in that is, I don't know how many, do you know how many different faith traditions are represented there?
Well, there's at least 8 that are sitting around the table at the executive committee, and more than that beyond that group. Yeah.
Okay.
So
it's I mean, when that group gets together, and I attend meetings periodically, but you're really privy to being a part of that group. When that group gets together, do they try to really understand one another, or are they just trying to work together to solve a problem? What does that council do?
Well, I think we've grown over the years. The imam was chair of it for a number of years, and he and I co-chaired it, and then he slipped out the back door one day, and
there's a sucker born every minute.
Well,
right?
and here I am, but happily so. That group really has grown into a group that is filled with friends, people who really care about each other, try to understand each other's faith. We don't claim that we agree on everything or share every idea that every other faith understands, but there is a deep, abiding friendship among that group. So when I see them at both the monthly meetings and then other activities that we have, there's a real embracing of. I mean, it's a sense of sisters and brothers who have sojourned together and are finding common ground. And we, like all good families, we bicker a little bit. We have different opinions and ideas. We try to find where we can land together that makes sense. We don't always agree, like we talk about and understand in our group, but that doesn't mean we ever have to be disagreeable. And I have yet to see anybody in our group, and there's about 25 who sit on the executive committee of that group, along with you and these guys, a number of others.
Let me ask you this: you say there's an executive committee. Is there anybody else? All I ever hear about is the executive committee.
Well, that's certainly the driving. That's the working group. So judicatory leaders, like people who are called bishops or the muckety muck.
Oh yeah.
They're part of an advisory group.
I've been missing the pointy hats.
Yeah. There's no miters in our group, but there is an advisory group that is part of that. And then every congregation represented is a part of that.
Okay.
So I mean, the goal is obviously to spread out into the whole community and really embrace everyone.
Have you guys? I mean, you don't have to name names here. Although it'd be okay.
If you want to.
It'd be okay.
No one would ever hear it if we do.
It's said
right?
that Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "If you haven't got anything good to say, come sit behind me."
That's right.
But have you ever found people in that group, and this is partly confessional, that your first impressions were, "Oh my goodness, that person is really irritating," But after you got to know them for a while, they were a little less irritating. Have you ever?
Yeah, well, usually I'm the one that people are going, "Oh,
that guy, the Reverend."
Really
once you get to know him, he's okay.
And once you get to know me, I don't know that it gets better. But I think, like any group of human beings that gather together, whether it's in a congregation or your workplace, you're just going to find folks that are a little bit more difficult to relate to. But when you stay in the game, when you kind of walk that walk, and you get to know people as human beings with real issues, real problems, families, and all that means, you suddenly that kind of melts away.
I'd like to answer that maybe a little bit different way, not to disagree with my friend the Reverend.
Never do that. Because we never disagree.
But it seems like things like the Interfaith Council and our show and the things that you're trying to do with your community conversation is trying to bring back something that we've really lost in our society, which is the ability to have really good conversations with people, sometimes difficult conversations, non-judgmental conversations. You know what I mean? That we're actually willing to listen to somebody's story in a caring, empathetic way before we jump to conclusions with someone. With everybody on their phones and tweeting and emailing and having these kind of interactions, and with what's going on in our political process, it seems that people were really missing out in our country these really interesting, enlightening, and difficult conversations.
Let me ask you, but let me take off on that, because there's kind of two sides to this. One is kind of an intellectual curiosity. I want to know what you know, because I just love to learn. The other is, and Mom, I'm going to bring you in at this point, because you are such a gentle spirit. I mean, here's a man that grew up in Lebanon. When he was a kid, they had people of different faiths around. He had Christian friends, and then he saw this war come into his country and just destroy the kind of peace and harmony that they had. And so when you came to the United States a long time ago, you wanted a country. You wanted to belong to a country that would help each other out. But part of that is just your gentle spirit. You've got such a kind spirit. So here's the question. How much of this do you think is, we're put together where we do want the best for people, and somehow we got brought up with that, and how much of it is really an intellectual intentionality, that whether or not I want the best for people, long term, I know the country's going to be best for my kids if this is the way I teach them to act. Yeah. And Mom, what do you think?
Well, not only I learned that from Lebanon, where I was born and grew up, but I look at the world today and I see wherever there's conflict, it's often coming out in diverse societies that don't know how to. It's dysfunctional families, dysfunctional communities. And here in Central Florida, we are blessed with, we are a tourist destination. Millions of people, over 60 million people visit. And we have people from all over the world. But we are blessed with leaders like yourselves who are deep in their faith, who understand really the core message from God, that it is, love God and love your neighbor. And that neighbor doesn't matter if they believe in God or not, if they look like you or they don't. God didn't put prerequisites and say they have to be like you, look like you, believe like you to love them. No. The idea there is we can make a community, and this is the only way for a very diverse community like ours and like our nation to be strong through our diversity by respecting one another, learning from each other, and learning how to navigate through our differences in very loving and caring and respectful ways. Instead of conflict doesn't solve any problem. And anybody trying to impose their will or their viewpoint on the other, they just going to alienate them. But for us, I see we're blessed with many, faith leaders and community leaders and even politicians in our Central Florida area that are understanding the importance of this in terms of business, in terms of jobs, in terms of civility in the community, in terms of, lessening tension and crimes. And we had our share, the Trayvon Martin with other things, but we were able to jump on it and really impulse and model for the nation and the world how these challenges could be addressed. So
let me throw out the gauntlet here. It seems to me, let's do a little cultural analysis. It seems to me that we are caught between two tendencies in our culture today. One is prone toward conflict. Everything is polarized. Everybody has different sides, and the media teaches us to do battle because that's what raises the ratings and so on and so forth. On the other end of the spectrum, we're becoming more conflict avoidant because we're assembling in our own little affinity groups. I wanted to be with a group of people who are like me, so I don't have to worry about being condemned, or I don't have to worry about being disagreed with, or how do you navigate that? How do you make peace in that kind of dichotomous, I used a big word there. just pause for a moment. Dichotomous. Dichotomous environment.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that we have to do is leadership has to model the kind of relationship building that what you're doing here through this, what we try to do through the show. And I want to say just for a moment that Imam Musri is, one of the most humble people I know also. He leads the largest Islamic community in Central Florida. About half of the Muslims in Central Florida, at least, maybe more, are part of one of his 10 mosques. He's the senior imam. He has 10 other imams that work with him, but he'll never tell you that, and he'll never toot his own horn. But we look to him for this kind of leadership that you're talking, of what we've got to do if we're going to help change the course of our current history, because and I think more people are on that side of the equation of wanting to build bridges and relationships. It's just easy to get caught either in the live in your silo or in some way demonize the other person.
And I just want to say, I'm going to take what you said, but a little bit different perspective.
Sure.
I think that you sort of set up the scenario of these people that, demonized, or you sit in your silo. But I think it's both. I think when you're in your silo, there's this idea that, okay, it's us against them.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're off in your silo and you don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
This kind of like, whether it's nationalism or populism, or whether it's in a particular religious group, because our religious groups are like this, circle the wagons, and then we sort of egg each other on to be against the other.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is making sure that we don't see ourselves as so isolated. We're all part of God's community. You can't live in a vacuum. You can't experience life in a vacuum as a human being. That doesn't work. It's all, it's like the guy that, pollutes the environment and says, what do you care? It's my airspace.
Yeah.
It's not his airspace. It's everybody's airspace. So, and I think that faith has something to say about that. Faith isn't about being in your own little isolated community. Faith is about whatever religion you are. If you're a Christian, you can't live in a silo. I, as a Jew, can't live in a silo. A Muslim. We're all in this together, and I think that's part of the problem, that we think that we can be in those silos and continue to exist emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, and even in practical ways.
What would you say, because this is about empowering the folks who listen to this program to make a difference. What would you say is a very practical way that anybody who's listening could kind of get outside their zone, get outside their silo, without, having to come up with some creative or brave, I'm jumping off a cliff here, but taking steps to have conversations with someone who is different than they are? What are some ways they can do that?
Well, Billy Graham used to, in every one of his meetings, he used to say to people, go make friends with someone from a different background, different nationality, different race, but go find a friend, make a friend, and that will help change the world. And I mean, Billy Graham and I might not agree on all theology.
What?
We agree. I know, but think of that.
You're off the panel.
I know, that's it. You're out. Get out.
Like you're saying,
There's
that
the
doesn't
door.
mean you can't take something important from
Yeah,
that.
but he had many good ideas, and that's one of the great ideas he used to stand on. So make a friend.
And breaking down the myths as if that you interact with someone that it's going to weaken your faith or your position. That's not true.
Yeah.
That's simply not true.
Well, when the commandment is saying love your neighbor as yourself, each one of us has several neighbors around us where we live, and neighbors where we work, and neighbors where we go to school with. And those are the folks that we are responsible for, that we need to build bridges with, get to know them, and show them who we really are. Expressing our faith through love, through compassion, and not through trying to impose our point of view on them, and they build walls and now we don't talk. So building those bridges come with the immediate group that you deal with every day. You don't have to go to the other side of town, start local. And before you know it, you have enough people around you that are teaching you and sharing with you things you never knew.
Well said.
Well, we're out of time, and I hate this. I'd like to, build 3 booths on this mountain and just stay here, but we got to go back down from the mountain. But thank you. Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you,
Stephen.
too. Thanks.
And these, again, we'll continue to be friends, and because I learned so much from these folks. But I hope also that you can take what we've said to heart, that you can do one step of peace by not only getting to know someone, but trying to understand someone who's not like you, because that'll build a better world. I want to thank you for being with us today and joining us today on Power Talks. Remember, these discussions are just that. They're discussions among us. But we'd love to see you continue the discussions at home and go one step further to get involved, as we had said. Because when Power Talks, you are empowered through the voice of truth. See you next time.